Okay, we might begin then. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Djarawar and Guyabul peoples, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm Laurel Burton. I'm the lead author of the Psychology for Queensland textbooks, units 3 and 4, which is the Year 12 book, which is what we're going to talk about today, and also the Year 11 book, which you would be potentially more familiar with at the moment. So welcome. So we've got some who are currently teaching psychology this year and looking to teach it next year, or are teaching in grade 10, I believe. It's a taste test, which is great. So I am the author. My experience is in teaching first year psychology at university level and really helping students transition into university. And I'm not a high school teacher. And so my job is not to tell you how to teach and to do all of those wonderful things that you do in the classrooms. It's really to bring to you what my experience is in psychology, especially around, in particular, those internal assessments that you have to do, which is where I think my background, experience, knowledge, skills in psychology can help value add to what you bring as well and your strengths as educators. So we'll talk about some of that as well throughout this process. And I'm happy to take questions as we go as well. Okay, so feel free to say, not sure about that, I don't know if I'll have the answer. But of course, the big thing is about this change to the ATAR system and also the new exams and assessments that students who are completing science subjects have to do. And that can be a little stressful for the students, I understand, in terms of actually helping prepare them to gain for that knowledge test that's going to come at the end. This is today's workshop, so we're going to look at a brief overview of Units 3 and 4 syllabus. As I said before, you know this actually better than me. I engage with it deeply to make sure that the Unit 3 and 4 book and Unit 1 and 2 books respectively closely align with those curriculum objectives. So everything that the students have to do as part of that assessment has been covered in the textbook. We'll look at the Psychology for Queensland series and all the resources that are available as part of this suite of program and resources, and focus on internal assessments and how Oxford is supporting you. But also I can probably we can have a conversation around those internal assessments and specifically the data testing, student experiments, research investigations and some things that could be done. And then, of course, there'll be questions and comments, but feel free to do that as we progress. There's some background. Joey Saunders is also, I believe, one of the co-authors of the Year 12 book, and she's doing some presentations in Brisbane as well, and quite actively engaged, and Melissa Rosita. Queensland. I'm Queensland born and bred. What I've really tried to do is put local examples in there too, something people who, hopefully the young people of today can relate to wherever. But of course, that's in context of an Australian perspective and an international perspective as well. So it's quite balanced in that sense, but there will be as many examples as I could find that were relevant to the topic that included Queensland examples. So key dates for Psychology for Queensland. So at the moment, you've completed Term 1, yay, and units Term 2 you're in at the moment, is that right? Yeah. The course structure. I was a critical friend and reviewer of the QCAAA assessment when they were putting the curriculum together, and it has a strong biological basis, a strong focus on the brain and behaviour in Years 11, in the Year 11, Units 1 and 2 to begin with. And I think that's because they're saying psychology is science and they want students to understand that scientific basis for behaviour. And so, yes, they revisit part of that again in Year 12 here, but importantly, I was saying, where's the cross-cultural, where's the other aspects of psychology that are also important in influencing behaviour, especially in Australia today. We need to look at the broader context of other influences. So that's why you will see in Unit 4 the social, interpersonal, attitudes, cross-cultural. And they're the topics that probably a lot of students would expect to find if they studied psychology. That's probably might be around the social factor, if you like, what attracts people to study psychology in the first place, around helping people, working with people, making a difference in that space. So again, we reinforce the learning in the biological bases of behaviour in Unit 3 with the localisation of the brain. So it revisits all the information here and also looks at memory and learning, again, building on what's covered here. So they'll be able to draw from some of that prior knowledge and learning from Units 1 and 2 when they engage in their Year 12 studies. And of course, so there's formative internal assessments this year and next, and then we get to the challenging part, which is part of this whole new process of assessment at the senior level, which includes the data testing as well as student experiments. Oh, okay. Oh, I've obviously missed my cue. So that's the Year 11 curriculum, and that would be the Year 12 one there. So, and of course that summative external assessment is only on Year 12. Okay, so this is about building, growing the confidence, the capability, knowledge and skills, and this would be similar to what they're doing in the other science courses as well. So now we talk about the new series in particular. It's about supporting teachers and students. This is I don't need to tell you this. It's a huge change in the way that you do your learning and teaching at this senior level. And it's about providing the resources and supports. And you will be pleased to know that when I talked to the students today and said, because how do you find the textbook? Do you like it? It was really, that was where they were most engaged and said, oh yes, it's fantastic, we love it, and the resources are great, and they love the online resources. So they said it's fantastic. So very, very positive feedback.
I love the online too.
Yeah. So and I have to say I was so impressed to see the resources that are there to help the students to apply the learning. Yeah. So offering the best kind, so that's, I'll just speak on your behalf. That's what your aim is anyway. And from the feedback today, I think it's been achieved. Pain points. I guess this is what Oxford University Press has identified. I don't know if you wanted to discuss any of these in particular. Ethics, research methodology are probably one of the things that are most challenging for you as a teacher educator who's been, hasn't necessarily had prior education in psychology specifically. So that's where hopefully the resources through the book can be a way that you can enhance and build on what you bring as the educator. Because ethics in research is what we do. We learn that from first year at university. And, walking through those processes of informed consent, confidentiality, debriefing, analysing the data, reporting the data, all of those things are part of that conversation that we need to have with students as part of their research methodology. And how you actually, what's the scope of the research project in terms of your school? My advice is to keep it simple, look for small effects only, and just, keep it simple so that it's a simple change over time, correlation analysis. Don't try and go too big or else it'll become too complex for them. And we were talking today about how they didn't find any result. It was not significant. And I said, well, actually, that's their finding. So explain why that might be the case. What did you expect a difference, and why might you not have found that? Okay, so there's always something to learn from that research process, and that's it was good for students to reflect on that, I think. You don't always have to have a significant outcome for it to be meaningful research. I do think this, in combination with the resources that the students have, because the students at Oxford University Press are all around self-directed learning. I'm very specifically worked and wrote it in a way at the book so that they can actually navigate through, and it's scaffolded to help them independently navigate the material.
They're reading it for fun.
Which isn't that great?
Going home and reading it just for interest, without it even
That's warms my heart. So
it's not like a chore. They go home and they just read it because it's.
They are
You haven't met.
Well, it's going to grow in popularity, I think.
know,
and
that's
so
what I'm worried
have the
about.
Year 10 students
My
also
kids are not
enjoyed
that
psychology?
excited,
It doesn't start.
Oh, okay.
but slightly different.
Well, that's great to hear. Another good piece of feedback for the crew. So, yes, I can absolutely guarantee this as the lead author. I quality controlled every chapter. Joey wrote some chapters, which were great, to make sure that there was a consistent voice across all chapters of the textbook, and that we refined it where we needed to, so it wasn't too large each chapter, so that yes, they're interested in actually reading the book, engaging with it, applying the knowledge through the self-test and through the applied activity opportunities. So everything in there has been mapped to the syllabus. Okay, there's nothing that hasn't been covered. So it's sequentially been included as well, so that it will scaffold their learning. And again, each chapter clearly indicates which syllabus points are covered. So I can, hand on my heart say that if it's in the syllabus, it's covered in the textbook. And it's not just about covering it, it's about enabling those students to engage deeply with that concept, to think about the application of that concept, because we know through good teaching, if they can apply it to their own lives or the real world, they're more likely to be able to understand it at a deeper level. And I have to, again, this positive feedback from the students regarding the Year 11 textbook and resources is that the support is available, and I think there are other resources now in terms of the workbook or something that I saw, which again, so there's a student workbook which is fantastic for the students to actually help again. So practice data test. So again, this is fantastic. So maybe there could be an opportunity to build on that, is what I'm hearing from the feedback tonight in terms of the practice data test. And science as human endeavour. So easy to use, accessible. The feedback to date is yes, they are, and I think very student friendly as well. So we've tried to use this language throughout the book to make sure it's clear, concise, to the point, practical examples where it demonstrates theory and practice, and challenging students. And so students are actually doing the pre-reading before they come to class, which is fantastic and probably an exception.
Maybe if you're at a private school. They
love the quizzes.
They love the quizzes, yeah. They are the chance to self-test and
And I think it's fun.
and fun, which is great.
I know, right?
Learning can be fun, right?
I'm just making my kids do it.
You're doing a great job with that, though. To be fair, you're doing a great job.
And so the practicals, so there's again full coverage of all syllabus practicals. Again, worksheets in the O-book, mock data and answers. And these are the extra support materials for teachers, but we talked about extra data in terms of the experiments. So I think, from what I've seen, there's outstanding supports available, to help support you to provide that educational experience for the students. And then, of course, you've got the Psych Toolkit, which is at the beginning of both textbooks, which is something that they'll continually go back and refresh their memory on in terms of key concepts, terms, meaning of different things that they might come across throughout the course of their studies in either 11 or 12. And just really there as a refresher, a quick and easy access guide to some key concepts in psychology that are specifically relevant to the topics that are covered in both years 11 and 12 curriculum. So it's a standalone reference chapter, and some study tips are in there as well. But of course, until we actually see the final exam, what it looks like, you can prepare as best you can, but that first-hand experience will actually help inform future study tips that might become available. Here's a quick tour, is that right? Will it tour through? So this is the book. As I said, I haven't actually seen the hard copy, so it's fantastic to see it in print there, which is nice that you give that advanced copy so for planning, especially because I understand you look to start teaching of the Year 12 and Year 11 to get ahead, because Year 12 is such a busy year, isn't it? So, okay, so let's have a quick walk through, and you've got page proofs in your welcome pack. So, key features of each chapter follows the same structure, and by now, if you've been using the book, you would actually this would all be very familiar in terms of the key ideas, which are of course mapped to the QCAA syllabus, case studies, challenge activities, study tips, and so on. I don't need to read that for you. Okay, so there's lots of different resources there for you. There's a psychology toolkit, which is a skills chapter, which is really important. We'll talk more about those skills and the student experiments and research experiments, and the practical manual, which is fantastic as well. So I think everything is there to support you, to support the students in their learning. Yeah. And here's an example chapter, which is about our senses, the basics of the 5 human senses. Again, trying to give a practical example so that when they see a candle, thinking about how far is it detectable, in the distance and things like that. So glossary definitions in the margin. There's always a challenge of some form throughout the chapter. Illustrated diagrams and key concepts are also defined there for quick and easy access. Here's a science as a human endeavour. Again, it's looking at the practical application of a scientific concept. So they look at that in the real world application. And often throughout the book, at each element, there's checking your learning. So there's opportunities to stop, reflect, and go back and review. If they didn't get it right or weren't sure how to answer it, that's when they need to go back and reread, reflect again on how they might answer. And I would definitely recommend engaging in these self-test opportunities throughout the book, because by having those notes, it's not about just shallow learning the concepts. It's about understanding the application of those concepts at this level, ready so that they can draw from that deep learning when they come to Year 12 studies next year. So opportunities to self-test are very important, and also for the students to start having a question using those cognitive verbs, which I learned when I first embarked on this journey, the use of the cognitive verbs and their importance in your Queensland curriculum. So, so that was interesting for me to adapt to. So here's a quick tour of our new study workbooks, which is fantastic that they're there for units 1 and 2 and also units 3 and 4. So Joey's obviously done those in collaboration with Melissa, and there is a sample chapter again in your workbook if you haven't seen it already. Again, similar to last time, but this is more about the data and the experiments and preparing for the research and understanding the research. What's credible research? What does that mean in terms of representativeness of the sample? What sample size is needed? Do you have males and females? What happens if you've got a sample of all males or all females? What does that mean? And that's the other thing for schools that do have female only or male only students. How do you get access to, unless there's a collaborative partnership in place? So I think, those are challenges that you probably face as part of your research application in the classroom. And influences on visual, another example chapter. So I'm quite impressed by the choice of the pictures. They're quite large and engaging, attractive and appealing to the eye, to get them interested to read more and to find out what this picture is about. And, again, opportunities for the students to self-test. And if they can't answer these questions, they need to go back because the answers can be drawn from the chapter. Okay? And just, where there's opportunity to self-reflect, it's a great opportunity for the student to actually learn about the personal application of it to their own lives as well as to the broader world. Writing workshops, so there's so many resources, fantastic resources for them, which again, those mandatory practicals, data sets, and suggested approaches for those practicals are also provided in the workbook. So have you seen those before? So that could answer some of the challenges that you've been facing around the experimental data, which is great to see that Oxford University Press actually forward planned. So well done. Again, more examples. Practice internal assessments. And they're a practice only, and they're in draft form. Should only be used as a practice for the internal assessments because there's still that uncertainty around the external assessments yet for Year 12. They're still under development. But I'll be looking at, for each of the chapters in here, the key concepts, who are the key theorists, I don't need to tell you, in terms of what are the key basics, what are the key elements of knowledge that they need to build on, that they will be able to build on next year in Year 12. And then I think we're over, but I might check in terms of the data test. Just wanted to check if you had any questions around the 3 internal assessments, in particular around the data test.
We're used to a program whereby when we give an assessment piece, it's got to be discerning from the word go. And there's no indication in this at what depth and rigour the data tests need to be. If you're going to evaluate a graph, a graph that goes versus a graph that goes, that's 2 different levels of evaluating.
I believe at Year 11 and 12 it should be, a simple change over time. It shouldn't be too complex.
Even in, I do chem as well, and I'm starting to sense that with the data tests, don't make them hard.
No, I think keep it simple is my advice.
And let the exam be the discerning thing at the end. Is what I'm getting.
Because if they've got a good basic knowledge of how to read and interpret a graph and the change over time.
So there's no big deal if they all got 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
See, in the current system, that'd be like, no, there's a flaw in this. I mean?
I know.
So we need to change our mindsets.
Yeah.
But it's okay that they all get
It's
10
a different
out of 10.
approach to assessment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think it's
assessment for learning.
like having a learners and learning the fundamentals of driving, so that by the time you get into grade 12, you've got the keys going, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
Type thing, like that's all.
But you could make it, you could do that just one data set, but you could add another, have 2 independent groups or something like that, or a control and an independent. So you could look at adding a level of complexity in Year 12. But I would look to build on it in Year 12, not start at the more complex.
That's a valid point, though.
So I think that's it for me. I can now thank you for your energy and enthusiasm in teaching your students psychology. I'm really excited to see so many students really take it on, and thank you to your schools.